Welcome to the debut episode of SVM Hoopin'. I'm sports editor Dan Waisner alongside assistant sports editor Christopher Hireman. We're about 3 weeks into the basketball season. We've had a lot of great highlights. Christopher, what's stuck out to you so far in 2012-13?
You know, when I got here about a year ago, we were going into the basketball season, and our expectations were low, admittedly. And coming into this season, we were kind of wondering what we were going to get. And every year, we come up with that preseason all-area team, and then you very quickly find out, the kids who are probably going to be on the later edition of the all-area team. And I think there's a lot of exciting things that have jumped out at us, and there's a lot of exciting things going on in the Big Northern West in particular. I think whether you're talking Oregon or Rock Falls boys or girls, you've got a lot of talent there. So I think it hasn't taken very long for us to realize that we might be a little bit busier after the turn of the year than perhaps we thought.
When you look at the Big Northern West boys conference, Rock Falls and Oregon are sitting 6-2, but they're both at the bottom of the conference standings right now. They've only played 1 or 2 games, so it's not, they're not that far behind. Mm-hmm. But every team up and down that lineup in the Big Northern West have winning records. And
if you're running into that kind of competition on a week in, week out basis, I think it really bodes well for what you're going to do in the postseason, because you get battle tested. You get used to, I know it's so cliche, you got to bring it every night. Well, it might sound like coach speak, but that's the case in the Big Northern West. So if you deal with that on a day-by-day basis, I think that you're going to be carved out of wood by the time you get to the second season, so to speak.
When you look at the Rock Falls Rockets, they're coming off a tough year. They had a lot of distractions off the court concerning former coach Scott Olson. They came into the Sauk Valley Shootout that first week. They were playing really well. Mm-hmm. They played those first couple of games really well. The first time I got to see them was against Newman. And unfortunately, that was the one game they didn't play really well. They came out, they weren't hitting shots. And I think that's going to be kind of the story of Rock Falls. When they're hitting shots, they're going to be very, very tough. But when those shots from the outside aren't going down and they're not getting a rebound for a second chance, which was happening against Newman, it becomes a long night, and all of a sudden you start falling behind. And that played right into Newman's hand in that game.
Speaking of the Newman Comets, you look at the guys I think have started out a bit stronger than we anticipated after the football team goes all the way to the Class 3A semifinal game. They come out and they win the Sauk Valley Shootout for the first time since '96, I think was the case. Yeah. You've got the Newman girls who are sitting on top of the Three Rivers along with Prophetstown at 5-0. But I think that's a bit surprising. But the guys coming out of the gate swinging like this after graduating, Tim Wilson, that huge piece at the top of the 1-3-1 zone. And from what I've gathered, they're getting it done with man-to-man defense. Mm-hmm. Very impressive for a team that was supposed to be a little bit tired coming into the basketball season.
Right. They weren't able to sit in the 1-3-1 zone very much, and that's the staple of Ray Sharp's system is that 1-3-1 with last year with Tim Wilson at the top, just kind of creating havoc. So they had to go to man-to-man a lot of games, except for that Rock Falls game where since Rock Falls wasn't hitting shots, they were able to kind of sit in that 1-3-1 and just let them take that shot and get the rebound then. Mm-hmm. But I look at a player like A.J. Sharp. And he came off football season. He was quarterback. He didn't get a lot of practice time going in, but he has made a lot of strides from last year. He was a nice player last year. This year he's a leader. He's a guy that he's confident on the court. He's hitting shots. He's driving to the hoop. He's taking over that role that was really Mike Lee's last year when the team needed big shots, needed big plays, needed somebody to do that. They gave it to Mike Lee, and now that he graduated, A.J. Sharp started to take some of that responsibility. Lucas Tavir is also kind of stepped up as that guy at the top of that 1-3-1 a little bit, and he's not as big as Tim Wilson, but he's a little quicker, and he's created some disruption.
Yeah, A.J. Sharp, our athlete of the week this week, SVM athlete of the week. I'm a company man, and one guy who I'm interested to see. Obviously, this whole team, I'm very interested in seeing what they look like in a couple of months. But Nolan McGinn is a guy who has, not exactly the same physical size as Tim Wilson. He eerily kind of looks a little bit like Tim Wilson, and he's got those long arms. So when they do need to use that 1-3-1, I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing him at the top of that a little bit too.
Right.
So.
Well, in the game I saw against Rock Falls, Kyle Moore just played great. He was matched up against Steven Armosca, who's probably the best post player in the area. And, he didn't shut down Steven, but he got the rebounds. He did the things. He got in the way. He made it tough on Steven to do what he wanted to do, and that's what they need out of Kyle. And I know you're a big fan of Kyle Moore from football season.
Absolutely.
I think you're going to see him do a lot of the same things on the basketball court that he did for football. He may not be the star, but he's going to do the dirty work that you need.
Yeah, and he's going to be a coach on the floor. Before we get away from Rock Falls, the girls having a little bit of a harder time going from the fall season into winter, and that's more of what we anticipated. But between the Rock Falls girls and the Oregon girls, I really think that they're going to give us a lot to write about. I guess compare and contrast the Big Northern West guys. I know it's early, but you look at that up and down the conference, it's going to be solid. What do you think on the girls' side? Do you think that either one of those teams can make an argument for the conference title?
Well, I mean, Oregon knocked off Lutheran, and Lutheran was probably your best team coming back. I mean, they
Huge.
were a team Rock Falls beat last year in the sectional, but Lutheran had not lost a conference game in 2 seasons. And for Oregon to get that win without Sam Lambrickson was huge. And she was only able to play that first 3 weeks, and you don't want your best player not out there, but it may in the long run been a good thing because Emmy Wright stepped up and she's hit some big shots, had some big games. She's making a case to be a player of the year right now. I don't know if that'll hold up through the whole way, but she's definitely put herself on that all area conversation.
Yeah, she was a freshman who, for us, from our standpoint, kind of came out of nowhere last year, averaging 16 and a half points per game through 8 games. Since Lambertson came back, all she's done is scored 15 points per game and had 13 steals. Meanwhile, you got Bree Tortelot facilitating just over 3 assists per game. Shout out to Christy Eckert, who's been keeping us updated on stats every week. This didn't come from me tabulating box scores. Meanwhile, on the guys' side for Oregon, I know we're jumping around a little bit, but every time I look at an Oregon boys box score, I feel like there's a different guy leading the team.
Yeah.
So they got 13 guys into the box score the other night in a row, but I think they're dangerous just because they're going to be tough to game plan for, because up and down they've got such balance.
Right, and when I did cover the Oregon girls, they kind of have that too. The girls coming off the bench may not be able to score like a Lambrickson or Wright, but they're athletes, and they can come out there, they can play some defense, they can make a couple passes, and do what you need to do to give you that depth, to give the other players that break. I mean, you go 10 people deep on a girls basketball team, that's huge. And getting back to that conference, I mean, it's Lutheran, it's Oregon, and it's Rock Falls. Stillman Valley was really good last year, won the sectional, but they lost too much. We saw that in the Sauk Valley shootout, that they're just not quite the same team. Mendota's a good team, but I think they're probably a second-tier team. And I haven't seen much on Byron yet, but I'm guessing maybe they're at that same level as Mendota where, if you don't come out and play, they can beat you.
Yep.
But if you do what you're supposed to do, you should go out and you should take care of business on them. And, staying on the girls' side, I think we'd be remiss. I think probably the most impressive team so far this year has been the Provincetown Profits, which isn't a shock because we knew they had a lot coming back.
Right.
But it's hard to live up to.
We prophesied that they did good.
Yeah. But it's hard to live up to expectations. I mean, even when you have an experienced team, sometimes you can come out slow, or things can happen in basketball. Maybe you start out 7-3, but they start out 10-1. They've got a decent coach, I guess. Only a guy that's coached, won 600 games in Don Robinson.
He's only the SVM dean of basketball.
Right. And, they picked up a huge win over Riverdale last week. I believe it was last week.
Thrilling game, too, that Larry Brennan covered.
And that's a signature win for the Provincetown Profits, because Riverdale's a 2A school. Provincetown's is a 1A school. For them to play against a talented Riverdale team and beat them, that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And sticking on the girls' side, I think when we look into the NUIC a little bit, I think Eastland is going to be pretty darn good for the long run, and that's both girls and on the guys' side. On the guys' side, I think Polo came out pretty quick, and I think they got a little dose of reality. But I think even though they graduated the Geary twins, I think they're going to be pretty good. Kind of looking at core schools, Dixon, where you talk about just the ongoing rebuilding process.
Yeah.
Girls have gotten a couple of big wins. Guys have gotten, debatably, a couple of even bigger wins. I caught up with Evan Thorpe on Friday evening, and we talked about the fact that there's some developing talent there. The success might not be there immediately, but Evan Thorpe, I agree with him. I think the right coaches are in those positions. So in the long haul, I think the Dukes and Duchesses are going to be in great shape. Sterling, meanwhile, I feel like every year I write a similar story about the Sterling teams. Last year was the fact that they were going to get up and down the floor. This year it's the fact that they're counting on their depth. Sterling, fortunately, I think that the conference in which they play, the NIB 12 West, I think you can make a case for them to be in the conversation, to make a run at a conference title. But boy, there's something about those line shifts that Coach Preston, first-year coach of the guys, the hockey fan in me absolutely adores seeing 4 or 5 guys going in and out at a time. hopefully that's going to let them wear teams out. But we'll find out more and more after we get through the holiday tournaments and they play exclusively the conference schedule. We'll find out what they're capable of.
I mean, what they're going to have to find out from what I saw is, you've got to score a primary scorer in Zach Remmert.
Yep.
And, a really nice player in Zach Everett.
Mm-hmm.
But
a grinder.
Yeah, a grinder. He's not a pure scorer. He's going to get his points. A lot of it, kind of garbage points, kind of like your Lucas Johnson points from a few years ago with Illinois. I'm probably dating myself there a little bit. He's going to get rebounds, putbacks, occasionally hit a three-pointer, but he's not going to create a lot of his own shots. They're going to need that other guy. They're going to need either a post player or another shooter who you can really count on to hit a big shot if they want to really contend. And in the NIB 12 West, like you said, it's not the big Northern, but it's a good it's a good enough conference that they're going to need that other scorer.
Well, we know Alex Soriano loves to shoot.
Yeah.
If we've learned something so far, so you have a guy who's not afraid to take the big shot that could help him in the long haul.
Well, and when you look ahead, even past conference to like a regional, you're going to have Rock Falls in there.
Yeah.
And, Rock Falls handled Sterling that first game, and you're probably going to have Rock Falls, Sterling, Dixon, and then, every year is kind of different. It could be a Rochelle, it could be somebody from the Quad Cities, the Western Big Six. You get the wrong team out of there. A few years ago you had Rock Island, who was just a world beater in one state. So you got to play well, and that's going to be interesting, and that's a long ways down the road. But
what we have in front of us right now, holiday tournaments and lots of them.
Yeah, yep. And, we're in the first week of it, the big ones being the Forreston tournament, the West Carroll Boys tournament, and then on the girls' side, Polo and Pearl City. Those are kind of the big tournaments we have, and it's sort of like the primer week because they're the tournaments where they're close. They're pretty much all Northern Illinois teams, and a lot of them from the conferences we cover. Then you get to like next week and the week after that, you get State Farm, you get the statewide tournaments where you got Rock Falls and Newman. It's an interesting contrast. I love these tournaments this week. The Forreston tournament's probably my favorite holiday tournament. I've got a lot of great stories from that one. Unfortunately, we only got one team left in the winners bracket after one day in Oregon. We'll see if they can take care of business tomorrow night and stay there.
I love any seeded tournament. Yeah. I get a kick out of that where, you look at that very tournament, Pecatonica snuck up on Polo.
Yeah.
If I'm Peck, I'm a little upset that we beat Polo, but we don't get credit for a conference win. But these really are, as you mentioned before we hopped on camera, they're a good primer. And it really kind of gives you a feel of what these teams are capable of. So we will we'll spend a lot of our hours over the next couple of weeks typing box scores and getting a really good feel for what these teams are capable of.
Well, then it can be a real turning point. Like the Forreston tournament, probably one of my favorite things I've ever covered was a few years ago. Milledgeville just had an exciting team, but they only had six or seven players that played, and really only 6 or 7 players on the roster. And they go into the Forreston tournament where you have Winnebago from the Big Northern, who was a monster team at that point, and you have Forreston, who was a good team, and they're the small team, and they made it to the championship game that year against Winnebago, and they lost it at the very end, but they had the chance to win with free throws.
Yeah.
But it kind of proved to be the turning point. They were really hot that first half. They lost that game. They played well the rest of the season, but they never seemed to quite keep going after that. West Carroll tournament was always real interesting because you'd even have, Dixon used to play in that one. So you kind of had all the conferences in the area represented up there.
Right.
So you got to see what the difference in level of play was. One year Dixon won it with Nate Trueblood. So there's always interesting storylines coming out of the holiday tournaments.
Well, I remember a year ago, shortly after I started here, it did give me a feel for sort of the enrollment in the different conferences and the levels of competition. So, even though they might not count as conference games, these are a couple of incredibly telling weeks for us. So, and you look at just kind of shifting gears. I know we. Trust me, after this week's video, we'll be able to, we wanted to cover so much this week, so it'll be a little bit more brief, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't touch on what Joseph Bertrand has done for Illinois, as well as what Matt Ross is doing for Chicago State, which it was just announced that they're going to move to the WAC going forward.
I'm not sure how that department's going to handle that cost, but
yeah, right.
That's a lot of traveling for a smaller Division I school. I mean, that's that. But Matt Ross, the impressive thing to me, and you can look at his stats from game to game, and sometimes he's scoring, sometimes he's not, but he's playing minutes. And that means he deserves to be on the court. That means he's doing a lot of the little things right. And, that says a lot for Matt. He had to earn that role. He took a lot of lumps as an underclassman for Dixon. By his senior year, they had a nice team. They, did some nice things. Were right there for the conference title, but didn't quite get it. Then they got put in a pretty tough regional, were bounced out. And then he went to Sauk and had to play a completely different style, and he picked up on that, and that is what really has allowed him to excel at Chicago State, because they're doing the same thing that Russ Damhoff does out at Sauk Valley.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And Joseph Bertrand, the top 3 on the ESPN top 10 plays last week. It's been really fun. I'll admit it, I've seen very little Illinois basketball, and I didn't have the pleasure of watching Joe here. But I really think we're seeing him thrive as a guy within Gross's system, as well as a guy who can come off the bench as an energy guy.
Right. Well, really, Saturday night when they beat Gonzaga was the first time that I've really got to watch very much of it. And I saw the first, 3 quarters. Obviously, they only play halves in college basketball, but it was basically the first 3 quarters of it. And the energy level as a whole is different under Grossi than it was under Weber.
Yeah.
And I mean, Joseph's thrived under Brandon Pauls is playing excellent. They're going to get tested in the Big Ten, and they're going to have games. They're a little bit like I said with Rock Falls. When they're hitting their shots, they're going to be really, really tough. But when they're not, they're going to have these games every once in a while where the shots aren't going down, and it's not going to look very pretty. And they're going to lose. You're going to lose a game here and there where to a team maybe they shouldn't, like a Northwestern. Who's pretty decent this year also, but probably at this point not a team that Illinois should lose to.
Right.
That's gonna happen, and that's where you're gonna see if this team has really grown from last year. Because when they started losing last year, the wheels just completely fell off.
Yep.
And if they take a couple hard lumps, they lose a game they shouldn't, then they play a top tier team in the Big Ten and lose that game too. Do the wheels go off? Do they lose the last 8 or 10 games like they did? And that'll be interesting, because that's the strength that mental strength you just haven't seen from this group. So.
Well, I think at some point we'll catch up with Joe Bertrand this season, see how he's feeling about things. And you can go to SaukValley.com and see Ty Reynolds, one of our sports writers. He caught up with Matt Ross and followed up on him too. So. And
the only other D1 girl person we should bring up is Jamie Russell. She had her third double-double Friday night as ISU beat Northwestern. This is a girl that has potential to play in WNBA. She was our athlete of the decade. For the first 10 years of this millennium. Yeah. And she keeps doing spectacular things, and she's found a home at Illinois State. I think we better wrap it up at this point. We're getting the signal from Angel Sierra. But the conversation isn't over, Christopher. We're starting something different with SVM Hoopin'. Hashtag SVM Hoopin' on Twitter. The conversation will continue. We want to hear what you guys think about what we talked about today. And whatever else is on your mind, send us some questions, send us some thoughts, and probably next week we might even bring them up on video.